On Tech News Today, Apple is still making boatloads of money. Google plans to start promoting podcasts, and the Motorola Droid Turbo 2 screen really is almost impossible to shatter. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Wednesday, October 28th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100-plus job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And by Wealthfront. Wealthfront is a low-cost automated investment service that is the most sophisticated way for you to invest your money. Whether you've got millions or just starting out, visit wealthfront.com/TNT to sign up and get your free personalized investment portfolio. That's wealthfront.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. My name is Mike Elgan, and our co-anchor today is ZDNet contributing writer Kevin Tofel. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm good. A little tired after 7 hours of driving to New York City for the Droid event, which lasted 30 minutes yesterday.
Great. And did you roll your car over the Droid phone to see if the screen would shatter?
You know, it's funny. They kept dropping the new Droid Turbo 2 on concrete. They wouldn't let us do it. And then they let us play with the phone. And I said, you know, we're 10 floors up. Can I just chuck this out the window? And they didn't really like that idea.
Yeah, no sense of humor at all. We got a video at the end of the show about one group that tried to shatter the screen. We're going to show you exactly what happened. So that is a lot of fun, especially when somebody else pays for the phone. All right, let's jump into our regular news. Apple reported earnings yesterday. Long story short, Apple is making massive quantities of money. Huge boatloads and truckloads of money. Katie Benner writes about Apple for the New York Times and joins us now. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great, thank you. Now, how did Apple actually do in the quarter that ended in September?
Okay, so Apple did extremely well. Like you said, profit jumped 31% to $11 billion, and revenue jumped about 22% to $51 billion. This is so much money. They did so well that on the earnings call, Tim Cook even mentioned that their full year increase in revenue is equivalent to the revenues of about 90% of the Fortune 500. This is a company that makes a lot of money.
Katie, I know that Apple's biggest business is their iPhone business, obviously, and I think they sold 48.04 million phones in the quarter, which is a good number for that particular quarter. Next month or next time is the holiday quarter. In general, though, you know, it's even looking brighter for Apple, according to Tim Cook. Do you agree with that assessment? And also, you know, he made a big deal today of saying 30% of our iPhone sales, or about 14 million, were from Android switchers. Do you think that's a big part of this play as well?
So the two questions are great. But taking the first one, I think that Tim Cook's job is to say that he loves the iPhone. And it's true that they've done very well. I'll start with the Android switch question. That's really essential because at this point, the iPhone is super saturated in a lot of markets. It's a very popular device, hugely profitable. So if they're going to grow, they only have a few levers to pull. One is growth in China, a region where they have a lot of room and where people seem to love the products. Another is getting people who've never owned an iPhone before to buy one. And then the third and very important one is getting Android users to switch. So that number is essential. And it's one of the things that analysts really took heart in when they saw it. Your first question, though, are these numbers good? Of course, they're good numbers. But on the analyst call, what was interesting is people kept on asking in different ways, how is Apple going to continue to grow? An analyst from Goldman Sachs said, okay, how do you participate in internet and services growth? An analyst, Tony Saganaki, asked, okay, well, what happens beyond the first quarter where you've given us some guidance? Cook demurred. He didn't want to address that. He said, we only give guidance out for the next quarter, which is reasonable. But at the same time, the question still remains, how will Apple continue to have this kind of blistering, huge growth?
When you see numbers like the sales of iPhones and the switchers and all that kind of stuff, It's tempting. I think it's human nature to kind of picture those numbers being spread evenly across the world. But I think that China is a special case in this report, especially because Apple kind of got a late start in China. It took them a while to get on China Mobile, which is the world's largest carrier. There are lots and lots of people in China who are switching from feature phones to smartphones for the first time. There are lots and lots of people who are buying an iPhone for the first time, but they're not new to the smartphone world, which means they have been using an Android phone. So when we see things like 30% of the iPhone sales were to people who used to have an Android phone, that's mostly China, isn't it? Isn't China really coloring and really dominating the impressive numbers in this report?
Sure, of course. And I think that Apple would agree. If you look at what happened with revenues, if you break them down by region, Greater China, which is Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China, almost doubled in revenue growth over the last year for this quarter. So China is extremely important. And the switching, those people who switch often will come from that region as well. So you're correct. And that's probably why we're seeing Apple doing so many big initiatives in China that help market both the devices and the brand. They're opening a lot of new stores. They just announced a couple on the earnings call. They have a goal to continue to open stores at a really fast clip. And as we all know, stores help create the ecosystem for the products. And they're also doing things like environmental initiatives in China so that Apple feels like a brand that is part of the country. So that Apple feels like a brand that's important, not just to consumers and to getting them these fun phones in their hands, but a company that is integrated into China more deeply.
Speaking of switching, let's switch over to iPad, which is also a reasonably sized part of Apple's business.
Was
because if I recall, and I could be wrong because I was on the road yesterday, the numbers for iPad sales are the lowest they've been, I think, since 2011. And I'm curious what the company has said about that and what their expectations are, if they gave any, for the iPad Pro, which is launching next month.
Well, what's so funny is that nobody on the call asked about the iPad. The analysts were totally uninterested. They were focusing on the iPhone because they really feel that that's where the growth is going to come from. But you're right. This is the 7th quarter in a row that iPad sales have declined year on year. This is really bad. I think they were down a little more than 20% this time around. And Apple has been trying to position the iPad as a business device. They're hoping to open up a new market for business users, whether that's people who work in graphic design or architecture or health. They really feel that they need to go after almost a completely different market to make sales of that device grow again. So nobody was very curious about the iPad on the call. And Tim Cook even said something about it. He said, hey, nobody's asking me about this. And everybody just sort of ignored that statement, possibly because of the bad numbers. But also, Apple's statements both on the call and prior to the call have always been, we're very hopeful for the iPad. We really think that, something great can happen with it.
Yeah, especially when they released the iPad Pro with its pencil.
And the pencil.
Don't forget the pencil. Can't wait for that pencil. Katie Benner writes at nytimes.com. That's the New York Times website, of course. And you can find her on Twitter at KT, the letter K, the letter T, Benner, B-E-N-N-E-R. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, guys.
All right. Take care. Got some more news for you coming right up, but first I want to talk about ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter, if you haven't gone to the ZipRecruiter website, and I encourage you to do that, go to ziprecruiter.com/TNT, your mind will be blown away by how much stuff they have for you in your whole hiring process and even some HR stuff. For example, did you know that ZipRecruiter will automate your I-9s and W-4s and all that kind of stuff? They automate it. They can automate your offer letter. They can automate your benefits enrollment. They can automate your employee handbook. That kind of stuff is time-consuming and difficult, especially for small businesses. And if you're a small business, you do hiring, or even if you're in a department at a big company and you do hiring, you got to use ZipRecruiter. It's going to save you tons of time. If you like to waste your time, if you like to hire inferior employees, don't use ZipRecruiter. But if you like to save time and you want to hire the best employees, you have to use ZipRecruiter. You can post a 100-plus job boards with a single click. And then when those responses come in, you're going to be amazed by the fact that you can filter out the qualified from the unqualified candidates. You can identify the actual qualifications that are deal breakers for you, and then never even have to look at the people who respond to your job who don't have that qualification. It's just such a great way to hire. It's the only way to hire. You'd have to be insane to not use ZipRecruiter if you're hiring people. It's the best way to do it. We have a Testimonial from a happy ZipRecruiter client named Scott, who said the recruiting process used to be so painful. Before, I'd post to several places, get 1 million resumes, but only a few responses from qualified candidates. It was torture. But with ZipRecruiter, we post once and get qualified candidates in one easy-to-review place. We've hired some of our best employees using ZipRecruiter. Today, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Check it out. Check out all the things they have to offer. Just on the home page, they'll have links into the incredible benefits and features that they offer. We thank ZipRecruiter for their support of Tech News Today. Alphabet, and still not used to saying Alphabet, but Alphabet is planning to open a podcast section on Google Play. Full disclosure, Twit is one of the handful of podcast networks working with Google for the launch. Recode's Mark Bergen wrote the best story on this news, and he joins us now. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. Now, when will Google Play podcasts be available? They're not available yet. And also, what the hell took them so long to get into podcasting?
The coming months is the answer. And this actually is from Google proper. So it's an Alphabet company, but you can call it Google.
Good.
Technically speaking. So that they haven't given details. I'm still fishing around. So hopefully you'll find out on Recode first when it lands. As for why it took them so long, that's a really good question. I think a part of it, probably the response they'll give, which is a bit of a canned one, is that they wanted to perfect it. And I think that they're actually taking a very interesting and different approach to what Apple's done with the Songza team, which is the streaming service they acquired last year. Was built on kind of what's called contextual playlists, right? So they serve up music and playlists based on the time of day or what the activities that you're doing, or even kind of something like the mood that you're in, right? So if you're kind of in a happy mood, they'll give you happy music, and so the idea is to do the similar contextual building of podcasts.
So, Mark, you had written that Google wants to reach people who might not have ever listened to podcasts before. And as someone who's podcasted weekly since 2005, I'm very interested to know, how are they going to promote this? Because there's so much noise in the Play Store and so many other apps and so on and so forth. There's podcast applications out there. Did they talk about how they're going to spread that message of getting podcasts out into the Google Play Store?
They did in a great bit. I'm sorry, my lights just went out for some reason here, mysteriously. But Google certainly has enough marketing budget to do that. I mean, I think that part of the promotion they're going to have is because it's part of Play Music, it's now pre-installed on all Android devices. And Play Music, Google hasn't given the numbers, but they also claim to have like a pretty sizable chunk of Apple users as well. So I think that one way they promote it is just that it all of a sudden is automatically available on about 80% of the smartphone market.
Now, Elias Roman is running this operation for Google, and you talked to him. Who is Roman, and what did he tell you?
Sure, Roman is super young. I think he's like younger than me. And he was the CEO of Songza. And I think that it seems from what I can understand is actually kind of a rare incident where it's a small startup that has remained relatively intact after the acquisition. Google has a habit of buying up companies, and then those companies come in and they're now like so low in the totem pole that they don't stick around. But it seems like everyone at Songza has, and they've given actually like some projects to work on. And this was, he claimed, part of their roadmap as Songza before the acquisition. So they started off with music streaming, and they were going to add podcasts. And so it seems like from what he said, this Google has just kind of pushed along. This just accelerated the roadmap here. They're now, Google Play gives them a much broader, they're in 60 different countries. They wouldn't have been just as a small startup that had, I think, at the acquisition, about 5 million users.
Mark, as I mentioned, I've been podcasting for a long time. I've been using FeedBurner's service for that for forever when they were independent, and then they were bought by Google. So there's a tie-in there. I'm wondering if Roman or Google or anybody has even mentioned FeedBurner and all this, because it's really a key and simple way to get an RSS feed out for podcasters, which you would presumably then be able to put into Play Music.
They haven't, nor did they mention the Listen app, which a lot of readers kind of sent over. It's like, hey, Google had something called Listen, which they shut down 3 years ago, that was integrated with Reader, which they've also shut down, right? So I think, if my best guess for Google is Google's a big believer in scale. And probably these kind of products didn't have the type of scale. I mean, they didn't have the multiple millions of users that Google expects and wants from its products, and that's probably why they aren't giving it a lot of attention.
The vast majority of people who listen to podcasts are on the iOS platform, at least in the United States, and hopefully this will change all that. I want all those Android users to get into podcasting. I personally think podcasting is the greatest medium in the history of mankind, simply because there's so much choice. You can listen when you want. You can pause it. You can, listen later. You can engage with audio podcasts while you're doing other things, while you're exercising or doing the dishes or whatever. And so I'm a huge fan of what they're doing here. I hope that they do it right, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. Mark, I want to thank you for your story. Mark Bergen is at recode.net. And he's on Twitter at MHBergen, B-E-R-G-E-N. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure.
All right. Pleasure's all mine. Now, we got a quick little bit of breaking news. Snapchat has just updated its app, and they've added slow motion, fast forward, and rewind filters, plus 3D touch support on iOS. So check it out if you're on iOS or Android. Of course, Android version doesn't have 3D touch support. The U.S. Senate passed the controversial Cybersecurity Information Act, or CISA, yesterday. Greg Otto is a tech editor for FedScoop and joins us to talk about it. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Now, before we get into your story, can you first review for us what CISA is all about?
Okay, so CISA is a bill that has been very, very popular this year in the wake of breaches in the private sector, Sony, Home Depot, Target. It is a bill that is supposed to grant liability coverage for private companies that want to share cyber threat indicators with the Department of Homeland Security and help figure out what is going on in the event of a breach. Now, with the bill that was passed yesterday, that information can be shared with the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, and the intelligence community as well.
So, Greg, you had written that the privacy advocates are calling for certain amendments to the bill that would protect citizens. And I know on our show last week, while this is all in flux, there was a lot of talk about amendments. What are the proposed amendments that are still out there, and why would people want these?
So the proposed amendments, which a lot of the big privacy amendments were shut down yesterday as part of the Senate bill that was passed, they were really focused on removing PII, personally identifiable information, from the indicators that are shared from companies to the government. Now, with the passage of the bill, this was just the Senate bill yesterday. There were two other versions that passed the House earlier this year. So these bills are actually going to go into committee sometime next year, where the fight over removing PII is going to continue from the privacy experts that are on the Hill. I know, for instance, Ron Wyden, the senator from Oregon, has been very, very vocal about protecting users' rights when it comes to cyber threat indicators. And he said yesterday after the vote that, this is going to be a long fight, and he's going to fight to make sure that PII does get removed before this bill goes across President Obama's desk.
Pro tip, if you pronounce it P instead of PII, it's a lot more fun to read these stories. Now, what's next for CISA? Now, this, of course, is going to be, they're going to be dealing with amendments and so on. But what do you see as the future of this? Where does it go? When might this become a law, et cetera?
So I think what you're going to see is it's going to be a while until this bill goes into a conference where the House bill and the Senate bill are sort of, worked into one bill that gets put onto President Obama's desk. Until then, I really think that you're going to see privacy advocates really ramp up the need to protect PII. This bill is, a relative of the other bills in the past, the CISPA bills, SOPA, PIPA, that were so controversial back in 2012, and that really got the privacy advocates all worked up. So I think with this passage, you're going to see a prolonged privacy fight before you ever see a bill cross President Obama's desk.
Greg, obviously the focus here is on the U.S., but I'm wondering, from international companies that do business here, consumers from around the world that might tie into services that are presented here in America, what's the international implications of this potentially?
I don't know so much that it's this as much as the safe harbor deal that's been talked about in the past week. I know that the European Parliament voted on something yesterday that is the framework for an agreement to start to allow, again, European Union data to come into the U.S. So on top of that, and this bill that was passed yesterday, the CISA bill, I really think that you're going to see, again, privacy advocates, especially in Europe, really, really make sure that they have their safeguards in place before you start to see something that's streamlined again.
What a world. What a world. It's, I think Europe does privacy very well. The U.S. does free speech really well. I wish there was some place that did it all really well. Greg Otto is at fedscoop.com. Before I let you go, Greg, can you tell us about FedScoop? Do you guys cover government and technology? Is it all tech?
It is, yes, it is. I would put it, when I talk to people about this, I say it is the intersection of government and technology. We cover everything from tech policy to federal IT to open government and open data initiatives coming out of the federal government. And we also have a state and local website, StateScoop, and we just launched an education tech website, EdScoop, this afternoon or earlier this week.
Wonderful, and it's unapologetically pink. Very nice. It's a nicely designed site. Greg Otto is at fedscoop.com. And on Twitter at Greg Otto. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure.
All right, bye. I told you yesterday about the South by Southwest controversy. Two panels generally covering harassment in gaming were canceled by the event organizers because of threats of violence. In other words, two panels that were to address harassment were canceled because of harassment. But the decision is turning out to be pretty controversial. Todd Martens writes about gaming for the Los Angeles Times and joins us to talk about it. Welcome to Tech News Today, Todd.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Now, can you review for us what Gamergate is and how this whole issue relates to Gamergate?
That's a tricky question. Gamergate is sort of, I guess to put it kindly, is, I guess, a culture war. It started in the summer of 2014 in response to, sort of serious criticism of games. A lot of people questioning whether games are diverse enough, both in their characters and in who's making them. And a small subsect of the internet sort of rose up and it's sort of a fear that sort of serious criticism of games is going to lead to a political correctness, whitewashing or like over of the medium.
Yeah, Greg, Todd, who is that small section of the internets, and what are they saying and doing about all this?
Well, basically the way they're handling it is just by harassing people who criticize games or people who speak intellectually about the medium. Unfortunately, they pretty much target women only. I've written about Gamergate for a year and a half now, and I've faced no criticism. I've faced no serious attacks. I know friends of mine, that's not the case. They're scared to simply speak out for good reason. People like, women like Anita Sarkeesian, well-known culture critic. She's been faced numerous death threats. She travels with, she has to travel with security and bodyguards now. Anywhere she appears, there's bomb threats, and so it's pretty offensive.
Now, for those of you watching the video version and wondering why Todd's video is smoothly panning occasionally, it's because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, but he is using Xbox. He's using Skype with an Xbox, and that's a feature of Skype with an Xbox, which is it automatically pans, zooms, and so on to optimize the feed. It looks really cool, actually.
That is correct. I'm trying to sit as still as possible.
Yeah, no, it's a great feature, and I believe you're the first person to use it on this show, so that's it looks really cool. So, okay, so what is So critics are planning to boycott or threatening to boycott BuzzFeed, Brianna Wu, for example, Vox Media. What is South by Southwest doing in response to the threats of boycotting and to the controversy? I can't say controversy today.
Well, South by Southwest kind of made a mistake in that they booked two of these panels. One of these panels actually had a number of people who are sort of sympathetic to the Gamergate cause, I guess would be a way to put it. And so once that sort of happened, there's not really two sides to the story. There's harassment, and then there's people who are being harassed and victims. So they were going to have people who are sympathetic to Gamergate on the panels. So I'm probably sounding, Gamergate gets confusing trying to talk about it, but so they canceled both panels, and right now they're talking with law enforcement, looking at ways to sort of reinstate perhaps some of the panels. There's been rumors that they're going to do an all-day dedicated to online harassment. I don't have that confirmed. I haven't spoken to anyone at South by about that. So, but in South by's defense, last year they did do a number of panels that did address harassment in the gaming industry. They screened GTFO, which is a documentary about harassment in the gaming industry, and they had an entire panel dedicated to difficulties women face in the gaming industry.
So we'll keep tabs on this, and we'll keep watching your coverage of this, Todd Martens. Todd Martens writes about gaming without threats of harassment at latimes.com. And you can find him on Twitter at Todd Martens. Martens is spelled M-A-R-T-E-N-S. Todd, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
In news you can lose, Apple is now doing comedy in their advertising. Here's the latest Siri ad, which features comedian Bill Hader.
Life-changing opportunity, if you please. It says, I have a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity for the making of many of millions of currency. Would you like to reply?
Yeah.
Okay, what would you like the email to say?
Sign me up.
Okay, Bill, here's your email message to Prince Asif.
Thank you, Barry.
Hilarious. All right, well, very funny. I didn't know Apple had a sense of humor. So we did know that Bill Hader did. Well, we told you yesterday about the new Motorola Droid Turbo 2 smartphone, which is available on Verizon. The companies say the screen is shatterproof, but the VentureBeat team decided to test that claim. Here's what happened.
With this phone, and now we're going to go over and see if we can't shatter it.
Okay, and so a person from VentureBeat is dropping the phone on a cobblestone street without incident. I believe that's Ruth Reeder, VentureBeat. And no problem. So they're just having trouble cracking this thing, and it's not completely undamaged.
Maybe? Yeah. Can you see
It's
that?
kind of interesting. There's a 5-layer process to the screen. I'm not going to throw mine down. Yeah, that's a bit much.
And now
there.
a guy picks it up and slams it on the pavement, and there's minor damage in the corner after he just literally slammed it down as hard as he could. It was like he was spiking a football in the end zone.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's an amazingly durable screen.
Yeah, it's actually a flexible display that they don't use as in they keep it flat obviously, but it can absorb and shift as it hits something. They did say the phone is not shockproof though, which is why the spike right there resulted in a cracked corner.
And that end zone spiker was Harrison Weber of VentureBeat, by the way. Well, we got some feedback from some TNT fans coming right up. But first, let's talk about Wealthfront. Wealthfront is such a great service. This is a company that's going to give you the best financial, it's better than financial advice. They actually do the investing for you, and at such low cost. You know, I can go on, and I will in future ads as well, about the incredible benefits and how they go about investing your money so wisely. They take a long-term view. They follow all the best advice, and they use some of the most sophisticated investment strategies. I could go on and on about all that stuff, but I want to talk about something that I think is really great. You know, some investment services will give you good advice, but then they'll also, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it with fees. You're going to pay for it in all kinds of ways. You're also going to pay a lot of taxes. And one of the great things about Wealthfront is they will handle your money in the best way possible and charge you hardly anything for it. Plus, they will save you. You'll skip out on all the taxes you possibly can. It's like Facebook in Europe or something. I mean, you're just going to be paying so much fewer taxes. And that's one of the strategies. It's one of the best strategies for getting ahead financially. Now, I talked about how they barely charge you anything. I'm talking about 0.25% a year. That's 25 basis points, and zero commissions and no hidden fees. Zero commissions and no hidden fees. That's less than $5 a month to invest a $30,000 account, and no additional charges of any kind for their services. It's just an amazing way. It's a great way for you to grow your money without some of your money being extracted and without paying too much in taxes. Visit wealthfront.com/TNT to sign up to get your free personalized investment portfolio. You'll see the customized allocation they recommend for your profile. And just for Twit viewers and listeners, if you sign up to invest, Wealthfront will manage your first $15,000 entirely free of charge for life. Claim your offer today at wealthfront.com/TNT, and we thank Wealthfront for their support of Tech News Today. For compliance purposes, I have to tell you that Wealthfront, Inc. is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are offered through Wealthfront Brokerage Corporation, member FINRA, and SIPC. This is not a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investing in securities involves risks, and there is a possibility of losing money. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Please visit wealthfront.com to read their full disclosure. We got some feedback from a couple of TNT fans, starting with email from one Ken Hill. He wrote, considering all the emphasis that Google and Apple are putting into self-driving vehicles, what countries, states, or cities have or may have in the future the modern transportation infrastructure needed to support it? The only country that I can remember being at the forefront of this public transit technology is Sweden, which has an agreement with Volvo. It would be a nightmare to configure, for example, my city of Atlanta with their traffic grid. And that is a great point. You know, we've been reporting on and trying not to make too much fun of the new Tesla feature, which has a kind of self-steering, but don't take your hands on the wheel. I still don't understand that. Are you supposed to wrestle the car for control of the vehicle? How do you let it steer without removing your hands from the wheel? And what is happening out there is people are recording videos of them actually taking their hands off the wheel, letting the Tesla feature steer, and then all of a sudden they go swerving out of the lane, and that's usually because there's something surprising in the road. There's something about the road that isn't sophisticated enough. And Kevin Tofel, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but I agree with I agree with Ken here. You know, you need good infrastructure, at least in the short term, to make sure that the cars understand what's going on the roads.
Yeah, I think Ken's point is well taken. And the way I see the whole self-driving car thing, it's actually a two-step process. And currently we're in step one, where the cars replace the driver for making decisions. But then step two will be adding additional smarts to the cars so that the cars talk to each other. And that's going to require some infrastructure, both in the vehicles and in the traffic signals and so on. And that way the cars will make better decisions based on what other cars are doing all at the same time. So we're certainly not ready for step two, and step one has its challenges as well, as you and Ken both note.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we also got an email from Russell Williams, who wrote, listen to your show yesterday, and somebody needs to put out an APB on the mind of the lawyer at the Justice Department. If you take their argument to its progression, their suggestion is that the manuscript or business plan, and he's referring, by the way, to our story, that they're going after Apple and telling Apple that Apple must unlock and extract information that's on encrypted iPhones because their argument is that Apple owns the software. They only license it to the user, so it's not the user's software, it's Apple software. So he's basically saying that, you know, whatever manuscript or business plan you're working on doesn't actually belong to you. It belongs to Apple or Microsoft or whoever made the device you're using. They, the Justice Department, have clearly lost their minds with this sort of overreach, and I think that is an agreeable point. Kevin Tofel, I don't know what your opinion is on this, but I think it would be a dangerous precedent if the Justice Department if they get away with this, basically.
Yeah, Russell's point is spot on in my opinion. I understand the whole licensing software and who owns what, that whole issue, but the reality is, you know, if things are encrypted at the user level, it's not Apple's business to get that information or hand it over to the Justice Department or anybody else.
I think the law enforcement needs to accept the fact that we can whisper to each other without being monitored. We can have private conversations, and sometimes we can do those electronically. That's just a fundamental right that everybody should have, the ability to have secrets and, you know, to not have everything harvested and searchable and all that kind of stuff. All right. Well, anyway, thank you for those emails, gentlemen, and we really appreciate it. If you want to tell us what's on your mind, just send an email to tnt@twit.tv. That's our email address, and I read every single email. We don't put them all on the air, but I read all of them. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Michael Kalorge, who posted this boomerang on Google+. Very nice. It's sped up, and the show is happening on 2 screens there. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a boomerang or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. Kevin Tofel, what are you writing these days?
Lots of words, and most of them are going to be on the new droids, the 2 of them that came out yesterday, as you said. I will not be throwing this thing down. No spikes for me. And also, I'm still deciding on my 2-in-1 device purchase, and as of this past Monday, 3 days ago, I've been using a Surface Pro 4 base model with the new type cover, and it's very impressive for what I do, which is a lot of writing and reading, obviously. So,
are you using the pencil?
I am not. It's magnetically stuck here. Let me pull it off. It attaches magnetically to the device. I haven't done that because I haven't needed to. I used to take a lot of digital notes back in the tablet PC days of 2004, 2005, but not yet. So I'll give it a go for my review.
All right. Well, wonderful. Kevin Tofel, is it Kevin C. Tofel on Twitter? And Kevin, thank you so much. We will see you next week.
Sounds great, Mike. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Let us know what's on your mind. Send email to tnt@twit.tv or call 260-TNT-SHOW. That's 260-868-7469. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on Google Play, but not yet. In the meantime, just go to twit.tv/TNT. If you're ever on the left part of the North American continent, come on in and watch us as part of our studio audience. Just send email to tickets@twit.tv before you come in. You can join our Google Plus community. Search Google Plus in the community area for Tech News Today. We just sailed past the 4,000 member level. You can follow me at elgan.com, and don't miss our other news show, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific every single weeknight. And that is the Tech News Today. This show is produced by Jason Cleanthus and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name's Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.